remember we saw in the book of Revelation the 7 candlesticks in the beginning of the book of Revelation. And we said that represents 7 churches, right? But later on, when we get to the 11th chapter, the church is raptured, we see 2 golden candlesticks, right? And we talked about that before. We went back to the book of Zechariah, and we saw the 2 golden candlesticks. But the funny thing is, the 2 candlesticks back there is associated by the time of the Maccabees. Remember we talked about the time of the Maccabees last week. We talked about the rising up of Antiochus Epiphanes and how he was a type of Antichrist. And when he polluted the temple, out of that came the celebration of Hanukkah. Remember that? If you take the 7 candlesticks and then you add the 2 candlesticks later on, you come up with the 9 and you have Happy Hanukkah. Right? Because the 2 candlesticks are added to the 7. The 7 went up in the rapture, right? And then the 2 witnesses go up. Now there's 2 more added. And so there's only one body. Both Jew and Gentile, they both represent the whole. But the mystery was hidden, I believe, since the time of Hanukkah. Every year the Jews celebrate Hanukkah. So what's the significance about this? I'm glad you asked. We have a 7-branch menorah, which is very common, which was in the temple, right? And then we have the 9-branch menorah. Now, the 7-branch menorah was all the way through history. And if you can remember, when we first began our teaching, we said that the 7-branch menorah used to represent, not only represented remember he had 7 stars in his hand? We said that also represent the 7 planets that went around ecliptic throughout those 48 constellations throughout the heavens. And there was these things called the 7 wandering stars. Well, that represented a menorah. Well, how come there's not a 9-branch menorah? Because in the days of Moses and the Old Testament, you didn't have a telescope. You could only see the 7 lights, the wandering stars. What were they? You could see the sun. You could see Mercury sometimes. You could see Venus. You could see Mars. You could see Jupiter. You could see these with the naked eye. So these were the 7. You could see the moon. Those represented the 7 wandering stars, and they were called the wandering stars because they followed the sun all the way. The sun went around 360 degrees around that planisphere of the heavens, and those planets revolved around the sun, right? But there was only 7, not 9. Well, so here's that planisphere I'm talking about. Here's the ecliptic. And the sun always goes along this path, and then when it gets to the end, it starts over again. Just that's what it does all the time, right? And those planets follow the sun because of the gravitational pull, right? So here you have those 7 wandering stars. You got the sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth. Not Earth. Earth is not one of them. Actually, you can see up here, it's not Earth, it's the moon. Okay, then you got Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Why isn't Earth one of them? Why is Earth not one of the wandering stars? Huh?
Because they're on it.
Yeah, because we're standing on it, so you're not going to look up and see the Earth, right? So you see the moon. What is absolutely amazing is that years ago, after I got my chronological Bible, I realized that all that boring genealogy and it was in the Bible, so you could trace from Jesus, you could trace all the way back to Adam. And they created a chronological Bible, and people have put times, historical times along all the scriptures. And if you get a chronological Bible, you'll find out there's about 4,000 years from the time of Christ to the time of Adam. Now, I knew, based upon the scriptures, that these stars in the sky were somehow a clock. And I thought, there's got to be, if there's a clock, there's got to be something at the beginning that would indicate that it's a clock. And I didn't know where to look, but I just took, roughly, it's got to be roughly 4000 BC. And so I used this software years ago. And what the software does is the patterns, the planets always follow the same path. I finally found a menorah where the planets lined up, completely lined up in this form. You had now in order for it to be a menorah, the planets have to line up on ecliptic, and the sun has to be in the middle of them. And so on September 8th, 3997 BC, there was this menorah in the heavens, which indicated that this was the time of the beginning of the prophetic clock. And when God showed me that, nobody else showed me that, God showed me that through this investigation, and I was like, I wanted to just scream and shout, because I didn't really know I would find something like this. And I thought, well, this is tremendous, right? And so we see about 4000 BC, I call it the setting of the clock. You know, we have an old grandfather's clock, and you wind it. And you wind the spring, and then it's set to go, right? Well, God had to, at some point in time, set the clock. So at roughly 4000 BC, God set the clock, and there was a menorah in the heavens. 7 planets lined up along the ecliptic, which is that path throughout the zodiac. Now here you can see it. You can see the moon up there on the left-hand corner. You see Jupiter, Saturn. Here's the sun, Mercury. Here's Mars and Venus. Don't worry about Neptune and Uranus and Pluto, because you can't see them, right? And you can see that the sun is in the middle of them, just like I said. Up here you can see, to read these, you got the moon pointing to Jupiter, pointing to Saturn, pointing to the sun. The sun is in the middle. Then you got Mercury coming from this direction, Mars and Venus. That's how it lined up. All the planets lined up at that time. To me, I was easy. It was easy enough for me to accept that God was showing me something. Because I was wondering, okay, so in September 3997, so there was this menorah in the heavens, which consisted of the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, the sun, Mercury, Mars, and Venus. So I began to, I got this question on the head. That wasn't enough. I thought it was really cool. But I didn't leave it at that. I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. What is God trying to say? What is He trying to show me? Or is this really God at all? So there's a couple scriptures that are of importance here. One comes from 2 Peter 3:8. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you see the yellow part here. It says, but beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing. One day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. We've read that several times throughout this study. How many days did it take God to create the earth? 7 days, right? There were 7 24-hour days. On the 7th day he rested. So he was done on the 7th day, right? So 6 days shall you labor, the 7th day shall you rest. But it also represented 1,000 days, and then there would be a final 1,000 day, which is easily the millennium, right? There's a 1,000-year millennium. Also, we went to find this. We went back from Jesus. We went back to 4000 BC. And that's 1,000 days, right? And then from Jesus to the present is what? About 2,000 years, or 2 days. And then you have the millennial kingdom, which is 1,000, right? And also, look what's interwoven in the scripture. The day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. It's almost like God is flagging that scripture, saying, hey, this is important. You need to get this. 1 day is 1,000 years. Okay, so God, I got this. And then, of course, in verse 12, he said, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of God again. So it kind of stands out. And this scripture, of course, shows us God saw everything that he made. Behold, it was very good. The evening and morning was the sixth day. The heavens and the earth were finished, all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work, which he had made. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work. God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work, which God created and made. Now, this is not new to me. Prophecy teachers have said for years and years and years that the seventh day represents a 1,000-year millennial kingdom, that there'll be 2,000 years after Christ, then the millennium will come, and there's been 4,000 or 4 days, prophetic days of 1,000 years before that, which when we go 4 days backward, we find that menorah in the heavens, right? So I'm putting together all these facts, and you see that question mark in my head. That means I'm thinking. Okay, so here's some of the facts. We have September 8, 3997 BC, which shows that that's when God wound the clock. Now, I say here the creation of the earth, but actually it was probably the birth of Adam right around there. Or not the birth of Adam, but bringing forth of Adam. 1 day equals 1,000 years. We got that. 4,000 years is 4 days until Christ. 2,000 years is 2 days have passed since Christ. And then the final 1,000 years will be the millennial kingdom. These are our facts. And we have that menorah. That's a fact. That exists. Okay? So I began thinking, okay, if I found a menorah at the beginning of the clock, and this is really a clock, then an alarm ought to go off at the end. That was my thought. But I didn't know where to look. And of course, this would take forever if you go through this 1 day at a time, because every day the planets move. And I'm working with this software, right? I have nowhere to look. But I knew this. Prophecy teachers had said 1948 was significant because that was the year that Israel was born. They used to teach, many of them used to teach, because it said this generation shall not pass away till all these things be fulfilled. They used to say a generation is 40 years. And so if you add 40 years to 1948, that means the end will come 1988 or before. That's what they used to teach. They said because everybody always felt like it was so close, right? And so but what they used to say was that a generation could either be 40 years or 80 years or 120 years. But they felt like it was happening in their lifetime. In fact, somebody wrote a book, it's kind of funny now, but the name of the book was 88 Reasons Why God Will Come in 88. Of course, God didn't come in 88, right? But that was saying a generation is 40 years. So we go to I went to the next one. Because if it's 120 years, I don't care. I'm not here. I'm not going to live another 120 years from 94. I'm not going to be around. So I figured, okay, so it wasn't 1988, so I'm going to add the 80 years to 1948, and I'm going to use that as a starting place. And so that comes up to, you can see I got the math here, 2028, right? And I started looking 2028, and I didn't see anything. And I thought, well, this is going to take me forever. I went like a few months, and I didn't see anything that even remotely looked like a menorah. Because you got to realize when these planets are moving, they all have their own orbit, right? This one's going this way, and this one's going this way, and this one's going. And we need to get to a place where all the planets line up with the sun right in the middle. And I didn't see anything like that. And I said, oh, well, maybe this is just a farce. Maybe there's nothing to it. And then I had this idea come to me, and I believe it was by the Spirit of God. I said, wait a minute. Why would God show the end? Because if you're at the end, you would know it. Right? What good is it? What good is it to tell the people who are being judged and they're already raptured and all the judgment's coming down that this is the end? Everybody knows the Antichrist is here. So I said, okay, what if the clock is set for the alarm to go off at the revelation of Antichrist or the rapture of the 144,000, which would be 42 months from the end. So I did that. I subtracted 42 months, and that came to March 12th, or 2024, and I looked, and lo and behold, on March 12th, 2024, there was another menorah in the heavens. And now I'm about ready to jump out of my skin. And this is happening, nobody shows me. This is happening in my own house, in my own research. And I'm like, you just want to tell somebody. But of course, who are you going to tell, right? Who's going to listen? Besides, the Lord didn't tell me to tell anybody. But this menorah actually shows up in the heavens on March 12, 2024, where you got the sun in the middle and you got the planets on either side. So let's look. Now, you can go back on YouTube and you can look at this more. But you see up here at the white here, I say here in my notes, March 12, 2024, it's the time of the end. The mid-tribulation Antichrist will reveal himself in the temple. At this time, you have the menorah will be Jupiter, then the moon, then the Mercury, the sun in the middle, which is the servant lamb. Then there'll be Saturn, Venus, and Mars. And so if we look here, we can see up here, we see the moon. And we can see, now we don't see Jupiter here, but we see the moon, we see Mercury. This is the sun. You see Saturn, you see Venus, you see Mars. Okay, it says here the next slide will show Jupiter next to the moon. So the moon's up here, so we don't see it in one picture. And you see Jupiter up there, and see Jupiter, you got Jupiter in the moon and Mercury. So there's the moon, and so now you can see Jupiter next to the moon. So you see the whole menorah, right? And you, like I said, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time. You can review this on YouTube. It'll be there. So then I was getting really crazy. But now this didn't all happen in one day. About a couple weeks later, I got this thought. And I can't remember all the details. But I started thinking, there's something greater than the beginning and the end. There's Jesus' resurrection. And if this is really God's clock, and I just started asking it, because it didn't nullify any. I said, what did it look like on the day of the resurrection? And so the Passover actually happened Monday, April 14th, AD 32. Look at that. There was another menorah on the day of Jesus' resurrection. This is the way the planets looked. And we'll see this in a moment. But what's freaky here, remember, there's only the 7 planets in the menorah, because the menorah has 7 stems. And with your eye, you can only see 7 planets. But at the time of the end, we know with a telescope that there's more planets. There's Uranus and Neptune. And some people say Pluto, but Pluto, they say now Pluto's not really a planet. But we're really not looking for 3 anyway. We're looking for 2. Remember, the 2 stems were called the 2 witnesses. And I thought, wow, is it possible there's 2 witnesses? And I mean lined up, right? Watch this. Here's the planets, and here's Uranus and Neptune. I call 2 witnesses, and I call Pluto a 3rd witness, because the scripture says, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, let every word be established, right? This is what happened. This is like freaking me out here, okay? So at the time of April 14th, AD 32, you had the sun in the middle, and you had on the left side, you had Uranus. And notice here, the 2 witnesses, one's on the left and one's on the right. Just like Hanukkah, when we brought those 2 candlesticks and added it, there was a vacancy on the left and a vacancy on the right. And at the time of the resurrection, there were 2 witnesses witnessing and testifying to the fact that Jesus had rose from the dead. And here you see Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, the moon, the sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars, Neptune, and Pluto is right there as well, which is fantastic because, to get 7 planets lined up, it happens. I mean, it doesn't take a miracle for it to happen. It does happen. Now, it doesn't happen so much when there's an actual sun in the middle of them, because then now you're adding some factors to it that that have to fit, right? But to have not only 9, but 10 line up, that's amazing. And now you can actually see them here. This is the time. So the way you read it across here: Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Moon, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Mars, Neptune, and Pluto. That's what we're looking for. Well, here's Saturn. Here's Jupiter. Here's the Sun, and you can see the Sun intersecting with the Moon. The Moon and the Sun are right next to each other. You see, that's what the 2 circles are here. And then Venus and Mercury, you can't see them all. And you can see Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter on this side. And here you can see from Neptune, you can see Mercury, Mars, and Neptune. So if you go back through, you can see that they're all lining up like I told you. These are just 3 different perspectives of it, so we could fit all these planets in. And look at, this was kind of an after. I thought, well, where's Pluto? Look at Pluto's on the line too. I had no idea that this would happen. This happened on the day of the resurrection. All 9 planets lined up with the sun in the middle to create a Hanukkah menorah with Pluto as a third witness. That is just absolutely amazing. Also, you see this circle with the dot? Remember there were 2 circles that were intersect? If you just spin it a couple hours, all of a sudden you got the moon overlaying the sun, you have an eclipse. What happened when Jesus was crucified? There was an eclipse, remember? Is this cool or what? So this is what we have, April 14th, AD 32. So we got this 9-branch menorah, so that's evidence. So now I got my question on my head again. I start saying, I wonder, what about the 2 witness planets at creation? Because when I looked before, I was only looking for the 7 menorah, remember? So let's go back to 3997 BC. And lo and behold, you had the 2 witnesses did line up, and they both lined up on the right-hand side, which doesn't sound real significant, except they are all in a line, right? Which is almost miraculous. But both of the witnesses are on one side of the spectrum. So I thought, well, that's pretty cool, because Pluto was also close. And, of course, you can see all the planets lining up here. And this is where Pluto's at. Now, it's not on the line, but it's close. Because Pluto is so far away from the sun, it can be almost anywhere. And to have Pluto that close is amazing also. But here's the 2 witnesses. Here's a witness and here's a witness. But it's on this side, okay, of the sun. So I got to thinking, okay, when the earth was created, there was a menorah in the heavens. There was, you had the menorah, you had the 2 witnesses. But I said, okay, so what about the 2 witnesses at the time of the end? Because I didn't look at that before. And lo and behold, the 2 witnesses at the time of the end menorah, they were also there. It's just that they're on the left side of the sun. So in the beginning, at the beginning of time, they're on the one side of the sun, the 2 witnesses. At the end, when the clock's done, they're at the other side, but they're still in a line forming a Hanukkah menorah. And pay attention to the date, March 12th, 2024. According to what this sign is saying, the time of the end will be March 12th, 2024. But I got some interesting news for you. That's the time the 2 witnesses go up. That's the time the 144,000 go up. When does the rapture occur? 42 months before that. What's 3.5 years before 2024? God is really showing something. 2024 subtract 3 years is 2021. We can expect the rapture. Now, God showed me this all the way back in about 1987 or so. But I would never show anybody. I would never tell anybody because I didn't think God gave it to me. He didn't share it. I never heard anybody saying it. It is so close. The end is so close. And we've seen so many things saying this is the end. This is the end. This is the end. Now here's signs in the heavens, which there's no way we can manipulate this. These are the planets lining up. And so here you can go back, you can review this again. When you got time, you got Saturn, you got the Sun, and then you got Neptune right next to it, you got Mercury, you got the Moon, you got Jupiter, Uranus. You can see here, you see Mars, Venus, Saturn, the Sun, Neptune, Mercury, the Moon. So here's the conclusion. We have a 9-candlestick menorah, all planets lined up, 9, one of the planets being the Sun, all lined up at the beginning, about 4000 BC. Then all of them lined up at the resurrection, and then all of them line up about 2024. Now take that into consideration. We had the 4 blood moons, which we know is the final blood moon, with the eclipse right in the center of it. And all of the other signs that we've been seeing. I believe it is right at the door.